Hey, sixth graders, welcome to day 2 of week 2. So happy Wednesday or Thursday, depending on what class you're in. So during week 2 or during this week, on Monday or Tuesday, you guys learned a little bit about air masses. And today we're going to take that one step further. So I'm going to start with just a really quick review of air masses. And then we're going to learn what weather fronts are. And then we'll talk about the 4 types of weather fronts and what type of weather is associated with them. All right, are we ready to get started? So our learning target for today is I can explain what an air mass, I need to rewrite that, don't I? I can explain what an air mass is and how air masses interact. On Monday or Tuesday, you guys learned what air masses were. And today we're going to talk about how air masses interact. And they interact at something called a front. But let's review air masses first. So air masses are these large areas or pockets of air that have the same temperature and moisture content. And there are 4 things that an air mass can be. It can be either maritime or continental. Maritime air masses form over the oceans, so they're going to have a lot of moisture with them, whereas continental air masses form over the continents and over land, so they're not going to have a lot of moisture. They're going to be dry air. Then your air mass can either be tropical, which means it's coming from kind of towards the equator, coming from a warm tropical area, so it's going to be warm air. Or it can be polar, which means it's coming down from the poles, so it's going to be cold. So you can either have cold wet air, maritime polar, or cold dry air, continental polar, maritime tropical, warm wet air, or continental tropical, hot dry air. What we're going to be talking about today is what happens when, let's say, the continental polar and the continental tropical air masses meet. What would happen in that area? That's what we're going to be talking about. And that's called a front. The place where 2 or more air masses meet or collide is called a front. So when we talk about fronts, we're talking about that area where those 2 air masses are first meeting. And I have weird ways of remembering things. You guys should know that by now. But the way I always remember what a front is I think back to medieval armies for some reason. And in medieval armies, the knights, they would have to go battle, and they'd line up and they'd march towards each other, and their front lines is where that clash would occur, right? On the front line is where that battle would first happen. And that's how I think of weather fronts. It's where the cold air and the warm air meet. And at that boundary or at that front line is where clashes happen and weather happens. So that's my way of remembering a front. There are 4 types of fronts. You can have a cold front, you can have a warm front, a stationary front, or something called an occluded front. We're going to go through all of those. But before we go through all of those, I want to jump back to our very first unit when we talked about the particulate nature of matter. And we talked about how when things are hot, their molecules are spread out more, they're moving faster, and when things are cold, their molecules are closer together and moving slower. And we're going to look at this video right here. This video is using water, but we're going to think of it as air. So what it is we have cold air or cold water right here at 66 degrees. And then over here, the red is warm air or warm water at 69 degrees. There's a boundary separating them. They're going to take that boundary off. So this area right here would be the front where those first meet. And let's see what happens. What do we notice? The cold air is moving under and the warm air is moving above. That is what always happens when cold and warm things meet. The warmer stuff moves above because it's less dense. Its molecules are spread out more. And the colder stuff sinks to the bottom because its molecules are closer together, is heavier because of that. So we have to, when we think about air masses coming together, warm air will move on top and cold air will go underneath. I hope that makes sense. All right, let's talk about our very first type of front. Our first type of front is called a cold front. And this is where cold air, let's get the cold air coming. There we go. Cold air and warm air are colliding. If you notice, the warm air is moving this way and the cold air is moving this way. The cold air is going to push that warm air up. That warm air is going to go up into the atmosphere very, very quickly. The water that was in that air, as it starts to go up higher and higher in the atmosphere, is going to start to get colder and form into ice particles, which will form clouds. So this cold air and the warm air, they're coming together. The cold air is going to come in and push that warm air up, and that warm air is going to end up going up pretty quick. When that happens, the moisture in that air is going to end up forming into clouds and then falling in the form of rain. On cold fronts, because this air is being pushed up so quick, we often get violent weather. So a cold front is where a cold air mass and a warm air mass meet. This right here is the symbol for a cold air front. It's a blue line with these triangles on it. And the triangles act like arrows. They point in the direction the cold air is moving. And on this boundary, or on this front, we can get tornadoes, thunderstorms, wind, really serious weather. We'll get the tall, thick clouds, high winds, thunderstorms, possibly tornadoes. After that front moves through, the temperature in your area is going to decrease because now you're in that cold air mass. And the air will become colder and drier than the warm air mass. So the cold air front is where cold air mass and a warm air mass are coming towards each other. If you're thinking of it as a battle, the cold air wins. It's coming in hard, it wins, and it pushes that warm air way up in the sky, which causes the moisture in that air to form clouds and to come down in the form of heavy rain, really windy, things like that. The next type of air mass that we have is a warm front. A warm front is when warm air comes up quickly on cool air. I'm going to pause this in a second. Now, if you notice, the cold air is moving this way and the warm air is moving this way. They're both moving to the left. If they were coming both at each other, it would be a cold front. But because the warm air is coming behind the cool air, and the warm air is moving faster, it will slowly rise above the cold air, just slowly. So there's not really winning taking place here. It just slowly goes up, and it will cause these thin clouds to appear. You might get a little rain, but not nearly as much as you would with the cold front. You can often tell a warm front is coming if you look up in the sky and you see these wispy light clouds in the sky, way high up in the sky. That will usually tell us that, oh, there's a warm front coming, so it might rain a little. This is a symbol for a warm front right here. It's this line with these red circles, and it's where warm air is moving faster and comes up and approaches the cold air. And as it approaches the cold air, it starts to move slowly above it. So at the front right here, you might get some stratus clouds, some steady rain, light showers, possibly some fog. No severe weather here, just light rain. After that warm front passes, you're now in the warm air mass. So your temperature will increase and it may become warmer and wetter. And you may see more clouds in the sky as well. So our next type of front that we have is called a stationary front. This is where both cold air and warm air are coming towards each other, but has enough energy to win. They're at a standstill. Neither one is winning. They just sit there and they just keep pushing against each other and pushing against each other and pushing against each other. So at a stationary front, this is what it looks like. This is a symbol for stationary front. It has red circles on one side and blue triangles on the other. The blue triangles point in the direction the cold air is going, and the red circles point in the direction the warm air is going. What's going to happen is this front's going to stay there for a while. It's not going to move much. And it might be rainy, dreary, some steady rain for days, just like that drizzle that just doesn't stop for days. This is going to be more similar to a warm front that just lasts longer because there's not severe weather associated with stationary fronts. It's just that constant kind of dreary days with just lots of steady light rain. And the final type of front that we have is called an occluded front. An occluded front is basically where warm air gets trapped by two cold air masses. So what will happen is there will be cold air here and cold air here. And as the second cold air mass comes up, it's pushing the warm air up in between. So the warm air is kind of getting trapped in between the two cold air fronts, or the two cold air masses. So at an occluded front, come on, okay. The symbol is purple. It's a purple line that has the triangles to represent the cold air and the half circles to represent the warm air. So the cold air is coming from two directions and the warm air is getting stuck in between. At occluded fronts, you're going to get severe weather, bad storms, gusty winds, tornadoes, and it's going to be similar to a cold front, but worse because this warm air has nowhere to go but up. And once it goes up, all the liquid in it is going to start to fall down. So you'll get very severe weather at occluded fronts. It's going to be more similar to a cold front than a warm front because you're going to get that severe weather. All right, let's review. So there are four types of fronts. There's cold fronts, warm fronts, stationary fronts, and occluded fronts. Here are the symbols for each of those. At a cold front, you have fast-moving cold air that just takes over that warm air. And at that front where those two meet, clouds are going to form. If the warm air is humid or has a lot of moisture in it, you're going to get rain and snow and thunderstorms. Severe weather-ish, but thunderstorms. A warm front is where warm air is moving faster than that cold air, and it comes up behind the cold air and just kind of slowly goes up. If you notice, this warm air has to go up really quick, but here this warm air can go up slowly. Here you'll get some scattered clouds. You'll see those wispy type clouds high in the atmosphere, light rain or snow, and it could last for several days. Then a stationary front is where both cold air and warm air come in together, but neither one is really pushing the other one out of the way. There's a standoff. Here you're going to get rain, snow, clouds, or fog that can last for days. Not severe weather, but just the weather's going to last for days. And finally, the occluded front. This is where warm mass gets caught in between two cooler air masses, and that warm air is pushed up. Here is where you're going to get severe weather too. Clouds and rain, and the weather will get colder. So this is a weather map, and we've been talking about those symbols for cold fronts, warm fronts, and occluded fronts, and stationary fronts. So let's look at this weather map and see. Right here, this blue line with this cold air, this is a symbol for a cold front. And what that means is there's a cold air mass here, and it's moving this way. Oh, go back. Sorry. I wonder if I can draw on here. Let's use my pointer. So this right here means that this is a cold front. So there's cold air behind it, and it's moving this way. And if you notice, this represents rain. So right on that front boundary, you're getting some rain, some pretty heavy rain. Here's a cold front again. This is a cold front. And again, you're getting rain. A warm front here coming this way. And you're getting some mixed precipitation, but not severe weather. All right, so our target was I can explain what air masses are and how air masses interact. I hope from this that you've learned that when air masses come together, when they where they meet is called a front. And at a front is where we get weather. We can get rain or thunderstorms or something that causes the weather to change. Okay, I hope that made sense. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll do a check-in on Friday.